Hello, and welcome to IEPs for Parents and Caregivers. I am Maria Davis Pierre, and I will be facilitating this webinar. So, a little bit about me. I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. I am the CEO and founder of Autism in Black, Inc., which aims to support Black parents who have a child on the autism spectrum, as well as educating healthcare professionals on the Black disability community. I am also a autism mom. I have a 7-year-old who has autism, and she was diagnosed at 18 months. And she is the reason that I started Autism in Black and became interested in helping Black parents navigate the school systems and learning how to better advocate for their children. When my daughter was diagnosed and she began school, we of course got the IEP, and no, none of the school professionals were going to take the time to sit down and talk to me about what the IEP is and what it meant, and what she should have on there and what appropriate goals looked like. Luckily, as a therapist, I had sat in many IEP meetings, but when it's for your child, it's completely different. And I noticed that this was a trend among schools, not only in the state of Florida where I live, but in other states. So what I decided to do was to condense the information and give at least the basics for parents to learn how to better advocate for their children when it comes to special education. So that is a little bit about me. I want to go ahead and get started on the content because I know that's what you're listening for. So the three things that we're going to learn today in this webinar are your rights and role as a parent in the IEP process, how to properly prepare your child for your child's next IEP meeting, and keys to ensuring your child receives the education they deserve. So let's begin with the IDEA law. The IDEA law stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is a federal law governing the special education system, and it is binding in all 50 states, which means that all 50 states adhere to what is in the IDEA. They cannot provide any less protection than what is stated in the IDEA. However, some states do provide more protection. So you get the basics of the IDEA plus more. And you can always go to your school board, the state school board website to see what exactly special education rights your child has. So the IDEA entitles all children with learning disabilities to a free and appropriate education. And I like to stress the appropriate education part because a lot of times, we're advocating for our kids. We want them to have the best, the best, the best, the best. However, the IDEA states that they're providing an appropriate education, meaning they're giving your child the basics of what they need to be successful. Okay, and we have to remember that when dealing with the IDEA, because yes, we want what's best for our children, but the IDEA states they're giving appropriate, they're giving the basics of what they need to be successful. So you need to take that into consideration when advocating for your child as well. So there are 13 disability categories that your child must fall into to qualify for special education. And not only must they have one of these 13, must they fall into one of these 13 categories, but that category must also adversely affect their education performance, which means my child is autistic and it affects how she learns in school. Or it affects her behavior in school. So just because your child has one of the 13 categories does not automatically qualify them for special education and an IEP. Okay, so the 13 disability categories are autism, blindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impaired, and in this category, your anxiety, your depression, bipolar disorder, those would fall into other health impaired. Um, I have seen some schools actually put autism under OHI, but that is incorrect. Autism has its own category, and if you see that, have the school fix that. The other categories are specific learning disability, like dyslexia, speech impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment. There are 4 basic rights of the IDEA. Free, appropriate public education. So the school must be preparing your child for further education, independent living, and employment. That is what the free, appropriate public education is preparing your child for. Least restrictive environment, meaning that your child does not have to be in a special education classroom. They can be mainstream with general education. And a lot of times you have to check and see when they say that your child is being mainstream with general education. A lot of times they'll think that, oh, my child has lunch and with general education students, but what really is your child is sitting at a table with nothing but special education students, and the general education students are around them. That is not mainstreaming. That is not your child being able to interact with the general education students. That your child has to be at a table with the general education students to be considered that. Okay. Supplementary aids and services. So these are your accommodations and modifications that your children get. And there's should be on the IEP a whole page dedicated to what accommodations and modifications your child is getting. And then assessments. So those are the assessments that an ABA therapist does, that the school psychologist does, that the teacher does. So those are the rights of the IDEA. There are 5 basic steps to the IEP process. 1 is referral, 2 is evaluation, 3 is determination of eligibility, 4 is writing the IEP, 5 is the IEP meeting. Parents are mostly involved in the first step, the 4th step, and the 5th step. If your child already has an IEP, then you will be constantly going through steps 4 and 5 every year, because every year your child should be getting an annual IEP meeting to review and see what their goals should be for the upcoming school year. So let's start with referral. So these are for the parents who child has not been qualified for special education, but you think your child does need to qualify for special education services. So the referral request can come from a parent, teacher, or other school personnel. If the referral is coming from any other person, then the parent or guardian, the school will need the parent or guardian's consent. So that means that a lot of times when our children enter school, their kindergarten teacher or their first grade teacher may notice some signs that indicate that the child may need more services. So the teacher would then contact, special education liaison, and they would then have a conversation with the parent. However, they wouldn't be able to move forward with any of the steps, any evaluation, any of that until the parent actually signed a consent form. Okay. However, if the referral is coming from the parent or guardian, meaning that you as the parent has seen that your child is struggling in school, think that they have a diagnosis, or they're getting outside services that indicate they do already have this diagnosis, but the school has not acknowledged the diagnosis, then what you would do is write a formal request letter stating that you want your child to be evaluated for special education services. And once you turn that evaluation in, the school has 14 days to respond, meaning they have 14 days to send you a consent form for your child to be evaluated for the special education services. So once you get that consent form and you sign it, say you sign it on a Friday, and then you don't turn it into Monday. That means from Monday that the school received it, they have 60 days to complete the assessments. So it doesn't count from that Friday, it counts from the day they actually received it in hand. So they have 60 days from date of receiving the consent in hand to complete the assessments. And it's so important to remember this, because a lot of times schools will try to extend these time limits or, make up their own, but a lot of times we have to remember 60 days, because if we wait any longer, we're looking at children then going into the next grade level, and then, they've passed the whole entire year where they're struggling and they don't have the supports they need. So make sure it's 60 days. And sometimes those 60 days do not count holidays, school closure days, and weekends. So the evaluations are looking for one of the 13 categories and adverse impacts, like I said earlier. I think it's also a good time to note here that this is not a diagnosis your child is receiving. They're receiving a categorization. Okay, so the school psychologist is not diagnosing your kid. They're placing them into one of the 13 categories. And if your child does qualify for special education services and they do get one of the categorizations, know that that is only good for school. If you want your child to your child's diagnosis to be acknowledged outside the school system, you would have to take them to a clinical psychologist, a developmental pediatrician, psychiatrist, neurologist, for them to give them a medical diagnosis. So in the school system, it is considered just a school diagnosis that follows them from grade to grade. So once the evaluations are completed, a report is written. And this report contains the assessment scores, the summary of findings, and the recommendations. The recommendations would usually be your child qualifies for special education, so they get the IEP. Your child qualifies for, does not qualify for special education, but does require some services, so they get this 504 plan. Or your child qualifies for nothing. Okay, so those are usually the three main recommendations that the evaluation is going to state. Special education eligibility is bound by the IDEA law. However, the law does not state definite rules for determining eligibility. So that's why a lot of times you'll see in one state, your child qualifies for an IEP, but in the next state, they qualify for a 504 plan, because it's the IEP team who determines if the child qualifies, meaning it's the school psychologist, it's the special education liaison, it's the therapist, and the parent, because the parent is a part of the IEP team as well. So it's those individuals who are determining if your child qualifies for special education. Once the evaluations are done, then a eligibility meeting is scheduled, and that is the meeting that you as the parent or caregiver would come into. Know that when you do come in for the eligibility meeting, they have already made their decision. Of course, you can ask that they retest or do a due process or what have you for them to to get your child qualified if they are deeming that your child is not qualified. But do know that they have already made their first decision regarding your child's eligibility meeting by the time you come to the actual eligibility meeting, because it's written in the evaluation summary. So if your child does qualify for special education services and they deem that in the actual eligibility meeting, the team has 30 days from that meeting to write the IEP and have an IEP meeting with you. And let's now talk about what's actually in the IEP. And this part is good for those of you whose children has already been deemed eligible for special education and they have a IEP, because we need to be making sure that their IEP is unique to them and fits their needs. A lot of times schools will write a standard IEP, and you'll notice that many children have the same IEP and it's not specific to what your child needs. So on the IEP is the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. That is your child's current ability. It states it at the top. My child can recite ABCs, numbers, can count up to 30. When I ask them a general question, they are able to respond, things like that. It's all what they can do, not what they can't do. So make sure that that statement is a statement of what your child can do. Okay, so each goal in the IEP has a page that has the present level of academic achievement for that goal. Then it will go into the annual goal, which is what will be accomplished in 12 months. So if we're looking at a social skill goal, it might say, that the child will do will have a conversation with at least 3 turns that they're having a conversation with. So that is their annual goal. Then some states have objectives and benchmarks, and these are actually the many investments to reach the annual goal. And what it is the actual breakdown of how they're going to reach that annual goal. It's good to note that the annual goal is something that should be accomplished in 12 months. We're not writing goals for your child to not achieve. Your child should achieve every one of their IEP goals by the next annual IEP meeting. If they're not achieving those goals, then that means that goal was too hard for your child. So you have to rethink the goal. Your child's goal should not be rolling over from one IEP to the next, especially if they haven't made any progress, because that means the goal was too difficult for them. So if the goal was too difficult for them, rolling it over to the next IEP is not going to be helpful. Breaking that goal down into something that they can achieve is what would actually be helpful. So go through your child's IEP if they already have one and see what type of progress they're making. Every report card, your child should actually be getting a IEP progress report as well, and see if they're making progress, see what they're stating in regards to the goal. And if you see that your child is not making progress, or you're seeing that you're having repetitive goals on every annual IEP, then schedule an IEP meeting, which you can do at any time. You don't have to wait for the 1 year, once a year IEP meeting. You can schedule them at any time. And talk to the team and let them know your concerns and that you want to adjust your child's goals. So this is what actually your child's goal should be looking like on their IEP meeting. On their IEP form. So you want to have something that states, by date, when asked, Susan will write and recite her personal emergency information independently, giving 4 out of 5 opportunities. So it should have a date. What is the expected goal date? And it shouldn't say by end of IEP, because the IEP sticks with your child until 12th grade. So it should actually have a date. So if I'm having my annual IEP meeting in April, then it should say by April 29th of 2020, when asked, Susan, which is the person who is to perform the desired behavior. So it should say your child's name. And then what is the observable act or behavior to be performed? In this case, it is to write and recite. And then it should have the relevant stimulus condition under which your client is expected to demonstrate the desired behavior. So in this case, it's independently, okay? And then what is the degree, criteria, or standard to demonstrate that they have achieved this goal? So for this one, it's 4 out of 5 opportunities. This is what your child's, all of their goals should be looking like. I've seen goals that say child will read I've seen goals that don't have a date. I've seen goals that have said by end of IEP meeting. I mean, end of the IEP. I've seen goals that have the wrong child's name. So you want to make sure that you're going through and making sure that these goals are specific and unique to what to your child. So please take the time out to go and review them. So accommodations and modifications, these are extremely important. They are there to help your child reach their IEP goals and objectives. That's what they're there for. Every goal should have mostly an accommodation or modification with it. If it's a math goal, a lot of times they're will be able to use certain things to help them, like the counting cubes, calculator, things like that, things that the other kids may not get, but your child does get to help them be able to reach their goal. So in most cases, they should be applied across all environments. The different types of accommodations and modifications are environmental ones, meaning that, you know, your child could be placed in a taken out of the classroom to take their test so they could do it by themselves. Transitions, tools and equipment, language-based, peer-based, sensory, behavior, testing and assignments. So look at the accommodations and modifications. If your child is able to let you know if they're helping or not, have that discussion with them. A lot of times they will say, no, this is not helping me, but this could, you know, so have that conversation if your child is able to have that conversation. If not, look at it and see if they're making progress with the goals. A lot of times it could be that the accommodations and modifications aren't helpful, just as well as the goal is not broken down enough for your child. So think about those things when you're looking at the accommodations and modifications. So to prep for the IEP meeting, once your child gets the notice, if it comes home with them or if this school actually sends it certified mail, whenever you get the notice of your child's IEP meeting, so say, okay, today I got the notice and see that it's scheduled for 3 weeks from now. What I'm going to do is send in the next day that I request a copy of the proposed IEP goals and assessments that were done prior to the meeting so that you can go over them. They're supposed to do this automatically. They're actually supposed to send you this automatically, but a lot of times they don't because they count on parents not knowing their rights. So make sure that you request a copy of what goals they are proposing and the assessments that they have completed to actually propose these goals. And what you're going to do is then organize your supportive material. You're going to look through these goals, you're going to look through these assessments, and you're going to see what they're saying. You're going to check to see if the goals make sense for your child. You're going to check and see that there's no goals rolling over. You're going to look at the accommodations and modifications. You know, you're going to look at all of that, and you're going to see if there are goals that aren't on there that you want to be on there. And if you want certain goals to be on there, then you're going to then get your materials ready to prove to why your child needs this goal. If your child has any outside professionals, speech therapists, ABA therapists, mental health therapists, physical therapists, anything like that, you want to ask them to attend the meeting or provide letters of support. If you could get your child's ABA therapist, their speech therapist, or their mental health therapist to come to the meeting, it would be absolutely amazing. If they cannot, then ask them for a letter of support that backs up your claims of what you're going to be asking for in the IEP meeting, because they are deemed professionals that have been working with your child, and they know what has been successful because, again, they've been working with your child. So ask for those. Then we get to the IEP meeting. So I like to let parents know that if your child is 16, they should be in the IEP meetings because that's when transition planning must start. I always recommend starting it earlier, around 8th grade if possible, because it takes, a lot of effort and a lot of time to think about what they're going to be doing after high school. But if not, if you can't start that early, it does have to begin by age 16. And at this time, the child actually does have to be in the IEP meeting with you, because you're talking about what they're actually going to be doing after high school. So scheduling of the IEP meeting. It must be held at a time and location convenient for all parties, especially the parents. So that means if you get the notice and it's on a day that you work or you can't get off, you can actually let the school know that they need to reschedule the meeting for a time that is convenient for you. It must be held at least once a year. So you should, if you have a IEP meeting in April, you should at least have one the next April, the following April. But I always recommend you having more than one IEP meeting a year. Every time that I get the IEP review that comes with my daughter's report card, I actually look at it, compare it to her IEP, and if I see that she's completed a goal, I will go ahead and schedule an IEP meeting because I want her to get a new goal. I don't want her to have a goal that she's finished and then they're not working on anything. I want you guys to do a new goal so she can continue to work on her skills. The IEP meeting must be long enough to cover all the issues. You can ask the school how much time they've allotted for the IEP meeting for your child. And if you feel that it's not going to cover everything, you can actually request that they extend the time. A lot of times, as parents, we don't have the time to go to the school every week to discuss something in regards to the IEP. We want to get it done all in that one sitting. So you can ask to see how long, how much allotted time they have for the meeting. And if it's not enough or you don't think it's going to be enough, you can always request for more time. So here's some keys to having a successful meeting. Know the special education law. Know your rights. Know the basics of your rights. Schools bank on you not knowing your rights because a lot of times they don't know them. So they'll make stuff up that benefits them. So as long as you know the basics, then you'll be able to maneuver and advocate for your child effectively. Don't be intimidated. Be an active participant and remember you are advocating for your child's best interest. A lot of times when parents go into an IEP meeting, it's them sitting across from 4 or 5, 6, 7 professionals. And a lot of times that's intimidating. But remember, you are a professional in your child's life. You are the professional in regards to advocating for your child. You are the expert when it comes to your child. They are the expert in their field and their knowledge and what they know, but you're the expert in your child. And as I tell all my parents, you're the team captain, so you as the captain, you have to make sure that the team is working together for the betterment of your child. And if they're not doing so, then get rid of that person that's on the team, okay? You also want to focus on your child's needs, not cost or admin constraints. So if your child needs something and the school is saying, oh, we don't have the money for that, or we don't have the staff for that, that's not your concern. Your concern is my child needs this, so then you guys have to figure it out, especially if it's already been written in the IEP. If they say, oh, yes, it does say your child needs speech, but we're kind of backed up and we don't have enough speech therapists. Okay, well, that's good and fine, but now you guys have to pay for a private speech therapist to come to my home and service my child. So make sure that if it's written in the IEP that your child is getting it because it's a legal binding document. Also, know when to fight and when not to. If you've been in this meeting for a while and you can see that nobody is going to compromise on the goal and give you what you want, then you can always sign the IEP, but say, I am agreeing to goals 1, 3, 4, and 5. I do not agree to goal 2. We are going to reconvene at a later date and go and try to compromise on this goal. I also recommend not signing the IEP in the actual meeting, I recommend that you take it home, look it over, sign it, and return it. You don't have to sign it in the meeting, but do note that the actual goals that are written on the new IEP don't go into effect until you actually sign it. So take it home, look over it, make sure that everything that you said was put in it, sign it, and return it. Sign off on the goals that you agree to, and if you don't, let it be known that you're not agreeing to them. So this is everything that we've covered in the webinar. I want to take time out to let you guys know about some of the courses and special things that I offer. I actually have a parent IEP course. So if you're saying, oh, this is great information, but I need to know more, I actually offer a course where we dive deep into all of these things that I talked about and more. And you can go to www.autismandblack.org/IEP parents to sign up for that course and to see what's offered in that course. If your child has an IEP and they're not making progress, or you're not feeling that it is specific and unique to your child, I also do IEP reviews, and you can sign up for that at www.autismandblack.org/IEP review BF. If you're a professional and you are listening to this and you have a client who has one of those 13 categories, you should be attending IEP meetings. And if you're not, please sign up for my professionals IEP course, where we will help you get the skills you need to be attending these meetings, because it's so important for us as healthcare professionals to be attending these meetings. So you can go to www.autismandblack.org/IEPBF. Also, I have a self-care book. I think that as parents and caregivers, a lot of times we don't focus on our own self-care needs, and a lot of times we don't know where to begin. So I have written a book to help you with just that. So you can go to www.autismandblack.org/self-care book. So I just want to thank you for listening. And if you want to email me, my email is info@autismandblack.org. You can follow me on Instagram at autisminblack. And my website, where you could check out and see any resources, are www.autismandblack.org. Thank you for listening.